With Mikael Granlund in Dallas now, there's a hole open at 2C. Who are some internal and, if Mike Greer wanted to get spicy, external options to fill the void?
You're Locked On Sharks, your daily podcast on the San Jose Sharks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, welcome to Locked On Sharks, the premier hockey podcast covering your favorite team in the Bay Area. My name is JD Young, caretaker at the Reef, also the co-host of Locked On NHL Tuesdays episodes. I want to thank you for making Locked On Sharks your first listen. Proudly part of the Locked On Network. We cover your team every day. And if you want to be an everydayer, all you have to do is just follow wherever you get podcasts, or you can watch on YouTube as well. And today, we start to kind of pick up the pieces from the Mikael Granlund trade. Saturday, we had our special, we broke it down. Today, we're going to be kind of looking at what the Sharks do now. So we're going to look at some potential replacements for 2C internally, and then look at some players who have been potentially available that would make sense for the Sharks if Mike Greer wanted to spend that brand new first round pick on guys who would make sense long-term to come in and be a piece for the Sharks. So before we get to all that, do want to let you guys know that today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. New customers can bet $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. All right, let's start, of course, with the internal ones, right? And I think there's two names that really pop up here. And then there's a name to keep an eye on, at least throughout as a potential wild card one here. So, of course, the first name, to look at for a potential 2C replacement is Alex Wennberg, who is hurt right now. Isn't expected to play on Tuesday against the Habs, and maybe he plays this week. I think the Sharks are going to be a little bit careful this week as they're entering the last week before the Four Nations break, right? Give these guys some extra time off, especially with a 2-week break coming up here to try to kind of rehab and get everyone ready to go for this final stretch here. But Alex Wennberg, who is signed this season and is signed for next year as $5 million, a year center, has played, middle six center for most of his career, and has been playing on the third line for the Sharks this season. He is the natural replacement for Granlund because, one, just like Mikael Granlund, he can play in any situation, right? He can play on the penalty kill, he can play on the power play, play 5-on-5, and I know the numbers this year at 5-on-5 aren't the greatest, but I would also look at who he's played with, right? And I wrote about this on the Reef of kind of some of the winners from the Mikael Granlund trade. And Alex Wennberg has to be a huge winner because assuming he becomes the 2C, right, he's going to go from spending most of his season playing with Barclay Goodrow and Luke Cunnin to now playing with Fabian Zetterlund and Will Smith. And while we might see a little bit of dip in production from like a guy like Will Smith, who's, I think really kind of coming along with Granlund, we should see an increase in production from Alex Wennberg because now you have legitimate top six wingers on your side, on your, to play with here. And I think for Wennberg is the obvious choice right here, right? Ryan Wasowski did say today, Wennberg is probably going to be the guy. He is hurt, and that they weren't going to try moving to William Eklund, right? We had the William Eklund center experiment last year, just didn't really kind of work out. Eklund's a winger, right? I know he played center in the SHL, but we always kind of figure Eklund is going to be a winger. That's, you talk to anybody, even going back to the draft process, Eklund is best as a winger. We've seen him really hit his stride and become a legitimate top six NHL player this season. So top six lines, not top six in the NHL, but he's a top six forward on a majority of teams. Eklund's very good. So Wennberg makes sense to be the guy who takes the 2C, but don't be surprised if Will Smith gets a run. I asked Mike Greer this question at his press availability Saturday morning. Could Will Smith get another run? And I think it's going to come down to Ryan Warsofsky and Will Smith and what they kind of want to do with him. And we saw at the beginning of the season, Will Smith was playing third line center, kind of struggled with it. He moved to wing, and we really seen him kind of take off and having a much more productive rookie season. Do you want to kind of mess with that right now, and especially with, less than 30 games left right now? Like, I wouldn't be surprised if he gets a run at it at some point, but I think if you're the Sharks, you have to I would just kind of keep him where he is and let him continue to grow and develop and do what he is doing, because he's looked so much better, especially over the last couple of weeks. And really, I think kind of going back even to the beginning of the year, where he's just looked more confident, more comfortable. Like he's making less of the rookie mistakes. He's playing with better pace. Of course, he's never going to be like a stalwart defensive center, which is fine. But I think if you do have him at center, you have to find someone who's going to be able to kind of cover for him defensively. And I just don't think the Sharks have a answer for a top 6 type of guy to do that right now. So I think I wouldn't be surprised if he does maybe get a taste of it a couple games here and there. This maybe especially after the trade deadline or at the end of the season, just to kind of see how his progress has gone, right? Kind of a nice little progress check. But I think for Will Smith to I think just let him sit at wing right now. And then this is a conversation we can have over the summer if we think Will Smith's ready to be a 2C now, or if we need to give him a couple more seasons, et cetera, et cetera. That's conversation for another season, another day. But those are your two kind of in-house options that make sense. A bit of a wild card would be Andrew Poturalski. So Andrew Poturalski, if you don't know, is the 1C on the San Jose Barracuda, AHL All-Star, leading the AHL in point. Like, Andrew Poturalski is one of the best centers in the AHL. Sharks signed him this season. Like, they really want to kind of add a veteran presence, especially up front. They signed him this offseason. He has been absolutely great. Outstanding for the San Jose Barracuda. Mike Greer did mention that they may want to give some of these veteran guys on the Barracuda a bit of a reward for their work. What veteran on the Barracuda has been better than Andrew Poturalski? Like, he has been everything you could want and more. And I know, again, going from first line center in the AHL to second line center in the NHL, it's a big jump, right? But I think Poturalski, I think he is a guy, if bit of a wild card here, to potentially play 2C for the Sharks, at least spot play 2C for the Sharks here down the stretch. The one thing though, like we know that the Sharks organization wants this Barracuda team to perform well, right? And they are in the middle of a very crowded playoff spot as we speak, right? I think I'm pulling up the standings right now, but the Pacific division is absolutely chaos right now between so the second team in the Pacific, the Coachella Firebirds, has 54 points. The Barracuda are 5th with 51 points. And then Abbotsford and Bakersfield are at 48 and 44. So there's 3 points separating 4 teams from 2nd to 5th. And I think at this point, the Barracuda I know they're 5th right now, but I feel, especially with Askarov coming back, I feel like they are going to kind of a lock as a playoff team. Now, going into the playoffs, wouldn't you like to have Andrew Poturalski as you're gearing up for a playoff run and trying to win some big games down the stretch to try to, 1, secure your playoff spot, but 2, secure the best possible seeding that you can? So that could be something that would be kind of a strike against him. But if you did want to reward a guy who has played hard, has played well, has done everything you asked for him with some NHL time, I think Poturalski is a guy well-deserving. I think he's skilled enough where he could play 2C, or at least come in and play 3C while you have Wennberg play 2C. Like Poturalski, I think, is a guy more than deserving of getting an NHL look here, kind of as a thank you to your AHL veterans. So those guys all make sense, right? Most likely Wennberg. Don't be surprised if Will Smith gets a couple games. Poturalski, super deserving, would be really fun. So we're going to talk about two guys who have been mentioned as available on the trade deadline as like trade targets, where if Mike Grier wanted to get spicy, that new first round pick burning a hole in his pocket, and he wanted to add pieces that could be not only help you now, but help you long term because they fit with your core. We'll look at some of those guys here next. Super Bowl 59 is here. One game, two teams, go Birds, endless possibilities, and there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. Whether it's predicting the first touchdown, calling the MVP, or even betting the coin toss, tails never fails. FanDuel makes it even easier to get on the action. With live betting all game long, you can adjust your bets as the game unfolds and feel the thrill from kickoff to the final whistle. Live betting feature lets you stay involved no matter what happens on the field. The app is super easy to navigate. Plus, knowing you can place a $5 bet, potentially win $200 in bonus bets for the Super Bowl. That's the icing on the cake. Download the app. Head to FanDuel.com to get started. Bet just $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Bet with FanDuel, official partner of Super Bowl 59. All right. Before we get to Dylan Cozens, do want to, of course, thank you guys for making Locked On Sharks your first listen. If you haven't yet, perfect time to subscribe. We got draft profiles coming this week. We're going to still kind of continue to go through the Granlund trade and the ripple effects of this. Plenty of great stuff coming here at Locked On Sharks, wherever you get podcasts. And of course, you can watch on YouTube as well. If you listen on Apple, perfect time to leave a review. It helps the algorithm gods spread the word of Locked On Sharks. So please, thank you. All right. Dylan Cozens, center for the Buffalo Sabres. Guy who has been potentially available, right? There was talk of Cozens maybe getting traded with Vancouver, right? As Vancouver was trying to decide that Elias Pettersson, JT Miller. Of course, we got a decision on that. JT Miller now a Ranger. Seems like it seems very much like the Vancouver Canucks want to let the Pettersson try to kind of figure things out here. Buffalo, we know, not having the season they wanted. Maybe they feel, and it feels like Dylan Cozens isn't part of their long-term plan. So would Mike Grier be interested in adding a guy like Dylan Cozens? So let's look at Dylan Cozens. Cozens, 6'3", 207 pounds, turns 24 next week. Like, dude hasn't even turned 24 yet. He's already played over 300 NHL games. He's currently on year 2 of a 7-year contract that pays him $7.1 million AAV. So he has 5 years left after this deal. This season, he's played 51 games, 10 goals, 16 assists, 119 shots on goal, averages 722 average time on ice, Corsi for 49.93, goals for 45.71. Looking at his wins above replacement, kind of percentile from JFresh, he's a 40 percentile player, like when it comes to projected WAR, playing second line minutes. Even strength offense, 72 percentile. Defense, maybe not as great. Great at assisting, plays pretty decent competition with pretty solid teammates. But you have seen his numbers decline over the last 3 years. Something to keep in mind. Cozens, looking at his hockey stat card, positive offensive rating, -3 defensive rating. So his net rating is a -2.4. Game score kind of up and down as you would expect. Offense has been good from him, and it's kind of really taken off over the last couple weeks here. So his evolving hockey card, again, kind of playing kind of first line minutes, plays on the power play, plays kind of second unit penalty kill. The defense isn't super great, but the offense is good. Really good looking at his all three zones, really good at kind of in the defensive zone at kind of retrievals and exits. Of course, being a bigger body guy like that would really help, because the Sharks do tend to have smaller forwards right now. So Dylan Cozens, this is someone I'd be really interested in. And again, like, you see those numbers and you see the decline over the past couple of seasons, but you also look at the Buffalo Sabres, who not really the like most put together organization. Not that the Sharks right now have a lot of room to talk, but like the Sharks have a plan, right? And we know what the plan is, and they're just in the like ugly phase of the plan. That they're the ugly duckling right now. That beautiful swan's coming, hopefully. But Cozens, who's 23, doesn't turn 24, has proven to be a really good second line center. And I think, especially with Will Smith's 19 right now. And I don't know if I'm personally ready to turn the keys over of the 2C to Will Smith next season. I think the Sharks should be very aggressive at finding someone who has center wing versatility, especially as a second line center. And our Dylan Cozens, who has played wing in the NHL, plays center right now. And I think he's a player who you could maybe buy the dip if you're into stocks and stuff like that. Buy the dip right now, and maybe a new situation. Potentially, you could see him play and kind of see that value go up. This is someone that, like, yes, it's going to cost you that brand new first round pick plus. Like, you're going to have to add, whether it's a prospect or NHL player or something, like it's like the Sharks are going to have to pay more. But again, this is why you kind of get all these assets, right? Is to be able to add players who can help you not only now, but in the long run. And I know the $7 million contract, that might feel like a lot, but again, the cap's going up, right? The cap's going to be up to like 95 next year. Like, it's the cap's jumping from 88 to 95. The Sharks are going to have $42 million in cap space heading into the offseason, where they got to pay Fabian Zyerland. Okay. You have to find a goalie. You have to redo. I mean, there's a whole checklist of stuff, but like the Sharks have plenty of money to do whatever they want. They don't really have a lot of guys at the moment that they need to pay. And $7 million now in a couple years, especially like in 2 years, that's going to feel like Granlund's $5 million contract, where I think this is a contract worth taking on and worth the risk, because I think Dylan Cozens is a good player who needs a new situation, right? Capo Caco, good player, terrible situation. He's producing now with the Kraken. Happens all the time. We have seen Dylan Cozens be a very good player not that long ago in the league. 2 years ago, 2022-2023 season, when the Sabres, right, that was his age 21 season. The Sabres almost make the playoffs, right, and kind of things fell apart. 81 games, 31 goals, 37 assists, 68 points. Now, do I think Cozens is like a perennial 30-goal scorer? Probably not. But can he be a 25-goal scorer? Especially if you're playing with Zetterlund and you have Will Smith's playmaking abilities. And then when Will Smith kind of is ready to take over the mantle and be a center, you can either slide Cozens to your 3C, you can put him on the wing. You just have more flexibility, and it just gives you more options. So I would be really excited about adding a player like Dylan Cozens, because, and then again, he's also got some size, which right now the Sharks they have guys coming like, Kasper Holttunen, Igor Chernyshov, Quentin Musty, like those guys have some size on them, but those guys aren't going to be playing in the NHL like next year, right? All those guys are going to be probably marinating in the AHL and not ready to kind of be full-time NHL players yet. But Dylan Cozens, like he's proved that he can be a very good NHL player right now. So he's a guy who I'd be really excited in adding. So we're going to talk about Marco Rossi, who has been potentially dangled out there, and maybe the Wild don't want to pay him. So we'll talk about Marco Rossi here in just 1 second. All right, before we get to Marco Rossi, do want to, of course, thank you for making Locked On Sharks your first listen. When you're done with this episode, go check out one of the other great shows here, the Locked On Network. Of course, you have Locked On Fantasy Hockey. If your fantasy hockey team needs some help, we got you covered there. Or any of the other shows here, especially in the Bay Area. You got Locked On A's, Locked On Giants, Locked On Warriors, Locked On Niners, or go see our friends over at Locked On Mavs, who are, I assume Nick just spent 30 minutes crying and put out episode, because that's what I would have done after this weekend's trade. So you can find any of those shows wherever you get podcasts. And of course, you can watch on YouTube as well. All right. Marco Rossi, another player who has been potentially out there. And this was kind of more beginning the season. But I think he could be potentially available for the right price. One, I think he's going to be way more expensive to acquire than Cozens, because Marco Rossi is having a much better season than Cozens. Two, he's on a cheaper contract. He's still on his ELC right now, so you're going to have to pay him at some point. But let's start with the kind of why the Wild would do this. One, I think they're hesitant to pay him. And the Wild are kind of in a little bit of a, their cap situation is not the greatest. I know they're going to have $15 million kind of freed up here soon, as they don't have to pay Suter and Parise's, their buyout money. That's going to be coming off the books. But looking at next year, they're probably going to have like $20 million of cap space, which is solid, right? But you have the looming Kirill Kaprizov extension coming, right? Kaprizov is due for an extension 2026-2027 season. They have some of their young guys who are kind of starting to, get out of their ELCs, and including Marco Rossi. You're going to have the next year, the first year, the Brock Faber contract kick in. You're eventually going to have to, pay Z Bulliam. Like, you're going to have to go find another. I guess you're going to have next year. You'll have, like, goaltender wise, you'll have a pretty cheap between Wallset, who's set to make $2.2 million, but like the Shark, like they're gonna have to make some, and then Philip Gustafsson is also going to be due for a contract in 26-27. But like, again, you have they have some questions about their roster, right? And I know that they do have some questions about Marco Rossi, if he's a long-term fit for this team. So let's look at Marco Rossi, the player here. So Rossi, 5'9", 182 pounds, 23 years old, the last year of his ELC, and then he'll be an RFA after that. So you still control his rights. 53 games this year, 18 goals, 23 assists, 92 shots on goal. Averages 18-13 average time on ice, 49.78% Corsi for, 63.38% goals for. Looking at his projected WAR, really taking off. Like, he's a 64% projected WAR player right now. 70% even strength offense, 30% defensively. Goals, assist, like he's good. Great competition. Like, he plays against a little bit tougher competition. Does have nice teammates that he usually plays with as well. But Rossi's an ascending player right now. Looking at his hockey stat card, plus 5.8% offensive rating. That is a super high percentile. Positive defensively, his net rating is at 6.8%. Like, he's a dude. Like, Marco Rossi is a dude. Looking at his evolving hockey card, like, 95th percentile player, playing over like first line minutes, plays on the power play, does not play shorthanded. So that's something to keep in mind, especially if you want like a 1-for-1 Granlund replacement. But like his offense is off the charts here. He's really good at creating offense, really good at passing, like really good at, like creating offense. Maybe like some of the defensive stuff is not as solid, as you would hope for. But again, like he more than makes up for it offensively. So for the Sharks, Marco Rossi, again, he's going to cost you more than Dylan Cozens because right now he's a better player. You're also going to have to pay him. And what does that contract look like? Who knows, right? Is it something similar to the Dylan Cozens contract? Is it something, do you potentially bridge him? I'm like, big question. That's the big question in Minnesota is what do you pay him? But again, Sharks have all the cap money in the world. Like they can do whatever they want. And yes, Celebrity contract looms and the Will Smith contract looms and the Eklund contract looms. But you're going to have to still spend the money at some point here. And if you're going to spend it, you might as well spend it on good players. And Marco Rossi is a good player. For the Wild, like if you wanted to potentially, right, they traded the first round pick for David Jiricek earlier this season. If you trade Marco Rossi and then you turn around and flip that first round pick for something else that can help you win right now, that could be interesting to them. But then again, if you're trying to win this season and this season are trying to win, wouldn't you rather just have Marco Rossi? Because Marco Rossi is a really good player. So this one's harder for me to kind of get there because one, I think the cost is going to be way more than Dylan Cozens because one, the contract, two, he's a ascending player. And three, like I think Dylan Cozens is kind of a depreciated value right now. I do also worry again. I don't try to be like size most of the time, but adding another 5'9" player to a team that has Celebrini, Smith, Eklund, all below 6 feet or below. But at the same time, like just add good players. And Rossi, I think, is a really good player. So I think this one's harder for me to kind of get there, but I did want to just kind of throw it out there especially for a team like the Wild, who, again, they're going to have to make some decisions here with their roster. And if Marco Rossi is a decision that they make where they're not able to keep him, the Sharks have the cap, like they have the cap space, they have the assets. And maybe this is a off-season type of deal, right? Maybe this Wild get through the trade deadline, get through the season, and then go into the off-season and try to figure something out. But Marco Rossi is a hell of a player, and he's also 23, so he fits right in with your core of players. And he's an ascending player who's starting to hit his prime right now. And would help give you some more flexibility with that Will Smith second line center decision. Because again, I think Will Smith long-term is the Sharks 2C, but are you willing to give Will Smith the keys to the 2C next year? Because I'm not ready to do that quite yet. So those are some potential options. Like I said, I think right now it's probably going to be Granlund. I think Wennberg is going to be the 2C. I wouldn't be surprised if Will Smith gets a couple looks here and there at the spot. And if Mike Grier wanted to be aggressive and go get players who are can help you now and help you long term, I think these are two of the best players who are potentially available that could do that for the Sharks. So that's going to be it for me today. We'll be back tomorrow. Scheduled a conversation with our good friends over at Locked On Canadians. So should have a good time there. We're going to look at some of the look how their rebuild's going as they are officially in the mix. So make sure you guys are following along wherever you get podcasts. And of course, you can watch on YouTube as well. Follow the show on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Locked On Sharks. Follow me on Twitter and Blue Sky at My Fry Hole. Till tomorrow. Bye, friends.